Oh, okay, you heard it. The recording is in progress. So let me bring up the PepsiCo PowerPoints and the PepsiCo team can get going. PepsiCo team, it is all yours. Take it away.
Okay, are you going to present? Or are you going to show it in this form, Professor?
Can you see the PowerPoints? You can see the PowerPoint, right?
This slide, yes, sir. It just is not in presentation mode. So I was just making sure that you were going to leave it like this.
Is there some other way you want it?
No, this is fine. I can start. I'm sorry.
And I'm going to flip the slides for you, right?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
All right. Well, we are Team PepsiCo. Jaleesa Roberts, Heather Sugg, Wayne Bruce Whitaker, and Sarah Weesey.
Yes. Yes.
All right, so these are the contents. We're going to be going over the introduction, background summary, the environmental assessment, markets, and economic variables.
Okay.
So on this slide, we have the introduction, background, and summary, the historic developments, PepsiCo's products, and the financial trends. So the history of PepsiCo. The recipe for Pepsi, the soft drink, was first developed in the 1880s by a pharmacist and industrialist from New Bern, North Carolina, named Caleb Bradham, who called it Pepsi Cola in 1898. In 1965, Donald Kendall, the CEO of Pepsi Cola, and Herman Lay, the CEO of Frito-Lay, recognized what they called a marriage made in heaven, a single company delivering perfectly salty snacks served alongside the best cola on earth. Their vision led to what quickly became one of the world's leading food and beverage companies, PepsiCo.
Okay. Now, don't feel that you always have to read everything on the slide to us if there are a lot of words. And full disclosure, I used to be employed by PepsiCo, and when I was, Herman Lay was still the president. Tells you how old I am.
I worked.
So on this slide, we have the history and the timeline of important events. As you can see, in 1965, Pepsi and Frito-Lay merged, creating PepsiCo. In 1966, PepsiCo introduced Doritos. And then in 1974, PepsiCo became the first company to do business in Russia. In 1998, PepsiCo acquired Tropicana.
Right. Do you have anything else to tell us about how Pepsi did business in Russia?
Not at this time, I don't. Later on in the slides, we talk more about it.
Okay.
So continuing with the history of PepsiCo, as you can see, in the year 2000, PepsiCo acquired Quaker. They also acquired Gatorade in 2001, as well as Naked Juice in 2006. Lastly, we had Life Water, which was introduced to PepsiCo in 2017. This slide just shows you the history of the PepsiCo logo. Over its 122-year history, the PepsiCo logo has seen 12 redesigns, as you can see here.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Something got away from me.
No, it's okay.
I'm not doing a good job, am I?
No, it's okay.
All
So
right.
this slide, as you can see, is the history and the competition between Pepsi and Coca-Cola. The Coca-Cola company has historically been considered PepsiCo's primary competitor in the beverage market. In December of 2005, PepsiCo surpassed the Coca-Cola company in market value for the first time in 112 years since both companies began to compete. This next slide is just showing you the PepsiCo brands that are sold all around the world. The image on the left shows you specifically places around the world where PepsiCo is sold. And then the image on the left shows you a diagram of PepsiCo's beverage products as well as some of their food products. The next few slides will be talking about the mission, the vision, and Abel's model, sorry. So this slide talks about PepsiCo's mission and their vision. As far as PepsiCo's mission, their mission is to be the world's premier consumer products company who focuses on convenient food and beverages. They seek to produce financial rewards to investors as they provide opportunities for growth and enrichment to their employees and their business partners and communities which they operate. In everything they do, they strive for honesty, fairness, and integrity. As far as the vision is concerned, PepsiCo's responsibility is to continually improve all aspects of the world in which they operate in environment, social, economic, and creating a better tomorrow than today.
Okay, now these are quotations from the literature. And as I mentioned earlier, if you don't want to, you don't have to read what's on the screen to the audience, because they can probably do it too. But in Business 670, you got a different definition of mission and vision than what's here. And we'll get a little bit of a difference when we see Abel's model. But remember that mission is the economic function that a firm undertakes to perform for society. And what's always interesting is to take a look at what the company's literature contains, which is usually designed for public relations to make you like the company. But the economic function, of course, and the charter with society that essentially permits the business to keep on doing business because it satisfies the society's requirements. Vision is a preconception in the mind's eye of what the company will look like in the future if it is successful. And those are two concepts that you all should remember from Business 670. And the reason I say that is that the purpose of 671 is to apply the principles that you learn in 670 to situations in real life, like a real company. Okay.
So on this next slide, as you can see, continuing with the PepsiCo mission and vision slogan, they want to create more smiles with every sip and every bite for their consumers, their customers, for their associates and communities, for their planet, and as well as their shareholders.
Okay.
As we continue, we will be talking about Abel's model and how it relates to PepsiCo.
Okay.
So we first have the customer groups, which is PepsiCo's customer groups consist of teenagers and young adults, and who prefer these drinks, who prefer energy drinks, sport drinks, and on-the-go drinks and snacks. The target market for customer groups include vending machines, supermarkets, and convenience stores. Next, we have the customer needs of Abel's models, which consists of convenient and quick to grab drinks and snacks for customers on the go, healthy snacks for customers, and drinks to give customers who needed an energy boost. And lastly, we have the unique competencies, this and how it relates to PepsiCo, which includes media advertisement, market research, global footprint, and financial resources to support their marketing strategies.
You know, since I'm an old PepsiCo type, I think I see something that's not here, and that's laboratories for scientific capabilities. PepsiCo, I think you'll be telling us later on, has a large number of laboratories around the world. And one of the things that the laboratories were doing even back when I was there, was trying to come up with different flavors. And the way to create them so that they were, you could do it cost effectively. But the differentiation is so important in this industry that coming up with unique products and unique flavors, unique snack foods and so forth, the research and development and technical capabilities are very fundamental here if you're going to get differentiation. I'll tell you what, since people are going to see this video, pardon me for just a minute, and I'll add something to that effect here, just to sort of, let's see, technical / R&D flavors. That'll be good enough. At least folks will get the idea when they look at the video. Okay, here we go.
Okay, next I'd like to introduce you to some of PepsiCo's products.
Okay.
All right, as you can see here, for most of us, these products are very familiar. This is the line of beverages that you can find in North America. Most of us can walk in any store and find these. Next, please.
Okay.
But PepsiCo also makes healthier snacks. They have the Sabra hummus, Quaker oats, Gatorade, bottled waters, juices, granola bars, etc. They also are composed of, at the time the slide was made, or a little bit after the slide was made, $23 billion brands worldwide. However, since then, they have sold Tropicana.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Yep. And Indra Nooyi, when she was in charge of PepsiCo, she had this idea of building for the future. So one of her great ideas was the fun for you, better for you, and good for you. You had the fun for you, which was the more indulgent snacks, the better for you, which were the snacks that were a little bit healthier, but still tasted really, really good. And then you had the good for you, which also tastes good, but were a lot more healthier, such as the naked juices, the hummus, and the Quaker oats.
Okay. Good slide.
And this is just another example of the fun for you, better for you, good for you. So far as beverages go, you have, of course, your Starbucks and your sodas down at the far end is more indulgent. And as you move across, you can see the water, the energy drinks, and finally the juices at the end.
There's a product on the right end that I've never seen. Quaker,
That's some of their Russian products.
Quaker oat beverages.
Oh, that, yes.
Have you guys ever seen Quaker oat beverage? I have not.
I have.
Have you really?
Yes, sir.
Did you try it?
I did not. I have a friend that actually really, really likes them though. And
Is that right?
it's not for me. I can't. Quaker oats are oats. They're meant to be eaten in a bowl.
Well, consider me educated. I had never heard of that product before.
Yes. Interesting fact, in 2005, PepsiCo did forge an agreement with Starbucks to start offering their ready-to-drink products in stores. I'm sure that we've all seen these around. And next slide. So the top picture is an example of products that you would find in India, very similar to what you find here in the United States. Some of the flavors might be a little different. They tend to lean towards some of the more spicy options. The one at the bottom are offerings from the UK. Of course, you have Walker's chips instead of Lay's. We have the Capella juices. The Quaker oats are still very popular. And of course, the traditional Pepsis. And then next slide, please, sir. And then this are the Russia offerings. And if you notice to the far right, we start getting into some dairy products. That is something that is unique to Russia with PepsiCo. And then next slide, please, sir.
Also, it was a very large acquisition and one of the U.S. first acquisitions in Russia. PepsiCo was the first company to get into Russia back when there still were tensions like there are today. Only at that point, Russian rubles were not, you couldn't exchange them for dollars. It wasn't a hard currency. And so you'll probably tell us later, but President Kendall really figured out some unique ways to do business in Russia and other countries. He was quite the international guy, and started PepsiCo on a road to international business that really made the company what it eventually became, a very international company.
Okay. And then finally, these are some product offerings that you would find in Asia. You see, we've got some familiar sites in here, but they also include some products that are down there. They tend to favor salty, sweet, and melon flavors for a lot of their drinks.
Yes. Wayne? Are you?
No, sir, this ain't mine.
Wayne, are you there?
I don't have the. I'm here, but this is not mine. Oh,
Got your name on it.
what? I'm sorry. I got a
Financial?
whole different slide. My apologies for that. This section, we're gonna go over the financial markets.
Right.
Dealing with them. Pepsi in 2019 and 2020, you can see their sales jumped up $3 billion there. Operating margin took a little bit of a dip of 0.9%, as well as a return on investment. And however, their return on equity went up 4.5%. And their leverage dropped to 5%, which if you would take a notice, their leverage is extremely high as compared to a lot of other companies, which would be a huge risk for a lot of companies. However, Pepsi has such a steady flow of income that you will see later on that the leverage really doesn't really matter with them.
Right. I think also we can see that Pepsi's operating margin is pretty good. I've worked for some manufacturing companies where if we got 8 or 9% operating margin, we thought we were doing great. And here, a company in this industry can knock down 18% plus operating margin. That's really good. And PepsiCo's rates of return are deceptively high. The rate of return on invested capital of 15% or better is very good among industry standards. But the rate of return on equity, you should be asking a question about. Does Pepsi, what is the rate of return on equity, ladies and gentlemen? What does it represent? It represents the growth rate, right? The growth rate of shareholders' equity. That's what return on equity is. It's the growth rate of equity before dividends are paid, stock is bought back, and new stock is issued. And so for shareholders' equity to grow by 50% is a little unusual. It's very unusual. And we're going to find out more about that later. But we at least want to acknowledge that there are some very unusual numbers here, and Wayne's already. I'm sorry. Well, it says Wayne on the monitor here, but it's Bruce, isn't it? Is it
Yes,
Bruce
sir.
or Wayne? Which do you prefer?
I go by Wayne.
Wayne,
My
okay.
government name is Bruce.
Okay. So Wayne's already pointed out leverage of over 70% is also unusual. So if you're going to be in business, if you're going to be in industry, train yourself to look at numbers and sort of critically, is this normal? Is this unusual? Is this real good? Is this not real good? And you need to be able to pick up on that pretty quickly in the world, in today's world of business. Okay, I'll try not to do that as much as I'm doing. I'm interrupting too much.
You're fine, Dr. Roney. Next we're
No,
going to
I'm
talk
not.
about we're going to talk about the markets.
Okay.
So PepsiCo operates both domestically and internationally, and so far as being competitive, they consistently hold the #1 spot for snacks, and they are a strong competitor still at the #2 position for beverages. Typically, they are beat out by Coca-Cola. And you can see here, there's some more information concerning certain markets, the percent of the revenue that comes from that market. And next slide, please, sir. All right, so here we have some graphs on the world soft drinks growth prospects. As you can see, bottled water right up at the top is the strongest growth aspect in this chart. And later on, I'll talk a little bit about it more, but thanks to COVID, more or less, soft drinks have kind of died down a little bit, especially as people are sitting at home and realizing that the more sugary drinks they consume, the rounder they get. So there's some health concerns there. So naturally, right underwater, we have sports and energy drinks. Some people are becoming more health conscious, so they are starting to drink more sports drinks such as the Gatorade, juices, and then of course there you have the carbonates. And as you can see, as I mentioned before, Coca-Cola actually globally has the largest share of that. And
Category in the consumer products industry, it's called a category.
Category, thank you. I couldn't think of the word. All right, and then of course, as you move further down, you can see the ready-to-drink teas, the ready-to-drink coffees, concentrates, and so on. Next slide, please, sir. When we talk about markets, as you mentioned, Dr. Roney, we were talking about, developing flavors, giving your product something unique. So in order to be competitive, I thought it was interesting that PepsiCo does develop very unique flavors for each market. And this chart here just shows that, the dollars in sales worldwide for certain flavors of drinks. As you can see here that the traditional cola flavor seems to be the favorite, which might be why Coca-Cola performs so well internationally. But when you go, through the list, you see some interesting ones. Of course, we've got our cherry colas, our cherry, grape, and then you see things like pepper flavored drinks,
Well,
which perform very well.
that's Dr. Pepper.
That's what I assumed, but I know
the research company Nielsen isn't supposed to name a brand, so they put pepper.
Pepper.
Yeah, assuming that you might figure that out.
All right, next slide, please, sir. And this is just another graphic to show the carbonated soft drink market size. Again, as you can see, the cola flavor is the most popular, followed by citrus, and then of course the variety of others that are offered, such as our cherries and grapes, lemons, peppers, etc. So far as trends in consumption and soda consumption per capita, if you look over to the top right of the graph on the right, the USA sits at the top for most sodas consumed per capita. Every other country is beneath us, which if you go to the next slide, please, sir.
Really, it's before we do, it's worth mentioning that the USA is really out of the pattern here, right?
Yes, sir.
We've got I believe, GDP per capita on the x-axis and consumption per capita on the y-axis. And we've got a couple items that are unusual. First of all, the USA is is an abnormally high consumer. But if we look over here to the left, we see that Mexico, Argentina, and Chile, all Latin America. And if you draw a line vertically from where they are to the trend line, it's even a wider variety from the trend line than USA. So the consumption of colas in the Latin American countries, and particularly Mexico, is really noteworthy. And later on, we're going to hear about diabetes and overweight. And what we're going to find out is that there's a relationship between this high rate of consumption and some diseases like those that I mentioned. But these are really, I mean, they're just not part of the trend, are they? They're way off the trend, abnormally high.
Okay, and
Here it is.
yes, sir. So as you can see, obesity trends worldwide, of course, the United States sits at the top for that, followed by some other countries, Germany, Canada, Italy, Spain. They actually didn't have Mexico on here.
That is a surprise. On
It is.
other graphs, we see that Mexico is number 2.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But if you go to the next slide, this is diabetes trend, and they do include South and, well, do they have Mexico? They include South and Central America, but they don't specify Mexico.
Mhm.
However, you can see again, North America, we kind of sit at the top there again, which
Sure.
correlates perfectly with our soda consumption, unfortunately.
Yeah. Also, we see that diabetes is really accelerating, and the projections are that there will be a lot more of it. And again, we have to look back to the consumption of carbonated beverages.
All right. Here we have a graph representing beverage market growth worldwide. As you can see, the Asia Pacific right now has the largest amount of growth. That is a area that PepsiCo has very strongly been marketing in, which we'll have examples of a little bit later, how they do that. Other places of note, Western Europe, obviously, which I believe includes Russia. Yes, no. I always get it confused. Eastern Europe's Russia, Western is Germany and France. I'm sorry. And then of course, North America there is right at the top. And next slide, please.
Okay.
So something that PepsiCo has been able to jump on the trend on are beverage, or excuse me, jump on the train on our beverage trends. They have a wide variety of enhanced waters. They've got a lot of natural beverages such as the kombucha and the juices. They've got infused nutritional beverages such as, you know, they had the Naked. They also have recently partnered with a brewery to start producing a hard Mountain Dew. I don't know if anyone has heard about that.
I haven't heard of it.
Yes, sir.
Is it alcoholic or non-alcoholic?
It is. And I believe it's set to come out next year.
Ah, okay.
Yes. All right. Sports and energy drink trends, as we can see that market is growing. Of course, PepsiCo, as the owner of Gatorade, they are poised to capitalize on this market, along with all of the other drinks that they are in development of, such as their flavored waters and their energy drinks. I believe, I think I saw today, Bang had some new flavors that came out, which is an energy drink that's very popular with at least my generation, I know. Then next slide, please. Bottled water. As we saw before, bottled water reigns supreme so far as drink sales worldwide. It's easily accessible, You can go into any store, you can buy it. Naturally, PepsiCo has also hit the market, or hit the nail on the head with this. It comes in flavored, non-flavored, carbonated, flat, mineral, you name it. You never knew you could do so much with water. And it's like I said, it's easily accessible, easily distributed. These are some expected fruit juice trends. It looks to be that fruit juice is a pretty steady, how can I put this? It's pretty steady across the board so far as all countries are concerned. It doesn't look like any one country consumes any more juice than the other.
Right.
Then sweet and snack trends. As we know, PepsiCo has a large variety of snacks, from salty and sweet, crunchy, soft, savory, you name it, they've got it. One of the things I wanted to point out here is the transparency trumps and the tailored to fit. PepsiCo seems to be very transparent with what they're doing so far as agriculture and how they're helping farmers who grow the ingredients that go into these snacks. The tailored to fit goes back to what Indra Nui had developed with the 3 categories. So there's a snack to fit, every lifestyle. If you want something indulgent, if you want something a little bit better, or if you're super health conscious. Here's an example of some food trends that are popular right now. Some of the packaging, for example, I'll talk about a little bit later. PepsiCo is in a partnership with the company to help develop packaging especially for their bottled drinks that is more biodegradable and environmentally friendly. We have some COVID trends. As you can see, snacking food had a growth during COVID. And if you look down at the bottom, so you've got your out of home and in home. So the line at the top there, the orange, that is the in home. And we, of course, all were sitting at home. People were snacking and drinking. And if you see over there for the non-alcoholic beverages, out of home consumption fell, but in home has risen. It's starting to kind of fall off again, though, as people are coming back out from COVID and they're becoming a little bit more health conscious about maybe some of the weight they might have put on while sitting at the house. Next slide, please.
It's remarkable just how severe some of these declines in out-of-home consumption have been, and depending upon just where we look at these charts, we can see that the out-of-home consumption has been declining before COVID. And there's definitely something to that, and it relates to what Heather has already explained to us, and that is the concerns for health and such as obesity and diabetes. And so the trends in consumption of soft drinks had been affected even before COVID arrived.
Okay, and this is just another trend showing you snacks and non-alcoholic drink trends during COVID. Again, this is the out-of-home consumption here.
Wow, some pretty big declines.
Yes, sir. And this, if you notice, this chart shows, as it says, you've got Europe and Latin America, those areas are represented.
Sure.
Right. Okay, and then we have the COVID trends and their effect on the EBT for PepsiCo. As you can see, the North America core EBT took a hit, not much of a hit, but took a little bit of a hit for 2020. The Frito-Lay North America, however, had a slight increase, and then the Quaker Foods actually had, it looks like, what is it, $100 million, or about $100 million increase during the pandemic.
Of course, these are products that are purchased in groceries, and during COVID, grocery store consumption went up. Just for everybody's benefit, EBIT is earnings before interest and taxes, which is a long way of saying operating profit. Operating profit is profit before interest and taxes, but EBIT is another phrase that means the same thing, operating profit. So we can see that the PepsiCo beverages took a hit in operating profit because it took a hit in sales. But those other products, because they're purchased in grocery stores, actually saw increases.
This slide and the next one are both North America specific, so far as trends in consumption. As you can see, as you mentioned, Dr. Roney, it has been kind of on a steady decline so far as soft drink consumption is concerned. And then if you'll look at the next one, this also gives an illustration of that. And so in conclusion, so far as markets go, it looks like the soft drink market is not the strongest at the present time, nor does it look like that the soft drink market may necessarily grow. It looks like in the future, we're going to be looking at a very strong water and juice market around the world.
Good, thanks for that summary. Yeah, this is a very compelling chart, isn't it? It goes back several years. The decline seems to start around 2000, and it's been a pretty steady decline. And the reasons for that, Heather, pretty well covered, but you could put them into one category, and that is health concerns. And so given that there are these health concerns related to carbonated beverages, we would not expect this trend to be arrested. We would expect this trend to continue on. Okay.
All right, so next we have PepsiCo's economies and markets.
Okay.
All right, so this slide is focusing on the environmental assessment of the economies. These are just a few of the revenue generating countries in which PepsiCo operates. So of course we have the USA. We also have China, India, Mexico, the European Union, and Brazil. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the numbers associated with those countries and what that means for Pepsi. All right, so this chart here, the years 2010 to 2026, we are looking at the gross domestic product, PPP, for the major nations. The major nations would include the US, China, and the European Union. The reason why we look at the PPP, which we will see on the next few slides, is because the purchasing power parity, basically it allows us to compare how an economy is doing with basically the standard of living in that country, which kind of gives a business a good idea of whether or not they would be successful in that particular area. So in this chart, again, we do have the major nations. As you can see, each country is growing. The EU has stayed and is projected to stay relatively the same, but we can see China definitely taking the lead there as we get closer to 2026. All right, we have the GDP PPP for emerging nations. So this includes India, Brazil, and Mexico. So what's really interesting about this is going to be the Indian numbers there. So as you can see, they're quite high compared to Brazil and Mexico. What is interesting about this, because Heather did mention something about Mexico and Latin America. Mexico and Latin America do have strong consumption while they have a relatively low GDP PPP. That is because they see products like Pepsi and colas as a luxury product. So they're less concerned about, health issues that we would be here in, the major nations, because they're just trying to get something nice and something delicious for a low cost, which is something that Pepsi can provide to them. All right, here we have the GDP PPP per capita for the major nations. So this chart is just the US and China. So for this one, the US is quite well above China per capita.
Indicating,
sorry, hold on one
That-
second.
affordable luxuries like beverages and snacks are going to be more affordable where GDP per capita is higher, right?
Correct. Sorry, I was
Which
getting those
might
messed up.
mean something else, and that is if we're going to grow in China, we're going to have to be careful of pricing. And we're going to need to pay more attention to cost and the kind of container we put the product in so that we can deliver it at a lower cost than in the United States.
Okay. So here we have the GDP PPP per capita for the emerging nations. So again, on this one, we have India, Brazil, and Mexico. So again, what is interesting, just like we saw there with the major nations, the per capita for India is relatively low. So while this market may be one of the best to enter, which we will talk about later, it is definitely something to consider as far as the pricing and how we approach that particular market.
Right.
And then this is pretty interesting. We have the unemployment rates for the major nations. So in this, we have the US, China, and the European Union. What was most interesting about this is that China stays relatively the same. And again, this is from 2010 to 2026. So of course, the next 4 or 5 years are projections, but they are projected to stay relatively the same. This is important for Pepsi because if people are unemployed, nobody's going to have the money to purchase the product. So we need to kind of keep an eye on that.
Yeah. And Europe looks like it's harder to get a job.
Yeah, Europe is pretty high. The European Union, I found that interesting as well. Just based on, you know, basic governmental things I've heard from that area. But I mean, the US was not surprising. And then 2020, you know, was COVID. So that made sense there as well.
Sure.
We also here have the unemployment rates for emerging nations. So on this one, we have Brazil and Mexico. Mexico is relatively low, which is a good sign because again, they see Pepsi as a luxury product. So we definitely can market to them while obviously the majority of the country and population have jobs. Brazil, not as much. Those numbers are pretty high, you know, peaking around the COVID times, but not declining as much as we would want to see. We also have the inflation, average consumer prices for the major nations. So this is for the US and China. I don't think anyone would find it a surprise here that the inflation costs are extremely high in the United States, while relatively low in China. Just again means that we would definitely want to, or for Pepsi, they would definitely want to keep an eye on the production costs and overhead costs used to, you know, distribute, market, and produce their product in that country. And then we have our emerging nation average inflation consumer prices for India and Mexico. India is growing steadily there, which is also something we definitely want to keep our eye on for PepsiCo, as again, this is the market and the area in which the company is most likely to enter into next. All right, and here we just have a summary, again, just explaining what the GDP is. Just provides information about the economy and how well that economy is performing. Really important for companies like Pepsi to take a look at that, to see how well their particular products may do in that country. It shows the overall health of an economy. And again, the PPP or purchasing power parity is super important because it compares the economic productivity to the standards of living between the countries.
Yeah, I've talked with, I think, most of the folks in this class about purchasing power parity. But until we had purchasing power parity, it was very difficult to compare growth rates or GDP per capita consumption potential of countries because their GDPs meant different things. They meant with regard to what income and revenues could purchase and what the people, individuals could afford in the way of standards of living. And we got some really misleading numbers. For instance, it made the US economy look like it was a lot larger than China. But when we adjust for purchasing power parity, lo and behold, it turns out that China's economy is actually much larger than the US economy. And that is an economically much more truthful way of expressing gross domestic product or gross domestic product per capita, because it reflects what the currency can purchase in that particular country, and then compares what it can purchase to what currency can purchase in other countries. And so we get a much better basis for comparison. Somehow I'm going to have to figure out how to say that more briefly.
And then this last slide is just continuing the summarization. As you said, in 670, India is the exciting market of the future, while China is the exciting market of the present. India will soon have a population higher than China, so PepsiCo should watch and invest highly in the Indian market as the population continues to grow and consumers that are able to spend more grow along with it.
Whoops. Did I hit the wrong slide?
The
We can
content
move-
slide is next.
Content
There we
slide is next. Okay. Jaleesa? Jaleesa?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Sorry about that. So this slide right here is just pretty much an introduction into our next section. So with this slide, we're going to be, well, with the next few slides, we're going to be talking about industry structure and the capability analysts. You can go to the next slide.
Okay.
All right, with this slide, this came out of the 2020 10K for PepsiCo. It shows the top left side shows the mix of their revenues, where they come from. You'll see that 26% of it comes from Frito-Lay in North America, while PepsiCo's beverages come in with 32%. However, the top right, you'll see that the Frito-Lay North America's operating margin consists of 46%, while only the PepsiCo consists of 17%. So it's a various mix of where their operating profit comes from, and such a big discrepancy. And a good reason for that is their mix of revenue, 55% comes from food and 45% comes from their beverages. Their operating profit, excuse me, and then their the net revenue, 58% of it comes from the US, while 42% of it comes from outside of the US.
Mhm.
Next slide.
It's especially interesting, and I think Wayne already mentioned it, but Frito-Lay North America, 26% of revenue and 46% of profit. So you can take the same proportions for PepsiCo Beverages North America, and you got 32% of revenue and only 17% of operating profit. Based on that, which product category do you believe is the most profitable?
That's the Frito-Lay.
It's got to be those snack foods, yeah. So Frito-Lay is more profitable than PepsiCo today. And that may have something to do with that declining trend that Heather showed us.
And here's the next two slides are going over the main financials of the company. And you can see that the sales took a dip in 2018, but then shot back up and all the way up to 70 billion as of last year. The operating margin came up in 2018 and then had a slight decline in 2020. And we think that's just because they're leveling out there. I believe in 2018 they also sold an industry, a category in their industry. I'm not completely sure right off the top of my head. Their return on invested capital is hovering around the upper teens and has been for a long time, which is very good. You were like Professor Rooney said earlier, you will never see another company with almost that high of return on invested capital. As well as their ROE is gone up. Now in 2018, you'll see the dip, and that's because they did a couple of issued stock buybacks in 2018, but have recently stopped that. So that's why their ROE is continuing to go back up. Next slide. You'll see that the long-term debt stays relatively high, but however, in 2020, it shot up. And that's due because of interest rates dropped down to the bottom of the barrel when COVID come in and the coronavirus came in. So, I mean, if you can make more money on borrowing money than you can making it with your products, you would do that as well. Share equity, again, they did, like I just said before, they've done stock buybacks, which caused a big drop. And it's leveling out as they've quit doing the stock buybacks. The invested capital is very high, staying around the low 50 billion, all the way up to the 60 billion. And the leverage is staying relatively high, which would be a red flag for any other company. However, Pepsi, as you would see in the prior slide, their sales are amazing and steady through the roof. So the company at that time did not care with their leverage being so high, but it is recently coming down. Next slide. This is just a slide showing all of the competitors that would be in the market. It's just showing the 12 main companies that make everything that you would buy, and PepsiCo is in a high portion of those. Hold on one second, excuse me. Sorry, my son came into the room.
No problem.
Okay. As you see, PepsiCo almost takes up a quarter of the top part. Coca-Cola comes in and wants that small little corner. However, Mondelez is a company that we're going to look at in a little bit, almost takes up the whole left side of this graph. And you'll see that they have a very wide selection of snack goods and all of that.
Yeah, it's interesting to point out here real quickly that we're going to be seeing PepsiCo compared to Coca-Cola, which is its traditional arch rival. But remember that the Frito-Lay and the other snack products make up now a very large portion of PepsiCo's sales and an even larger portion of its operating profit. And its PepsiCo's nearest competitor when it comes to snack foods is Mondelez. And so Wayne has compared that as well as other snack food companies so that we can appreciate the proportions here. This could give you a headache if you looked at this slide long enough, because it's got so many different brands.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean that.
Now the next slide.
I didn't mean that as a comment on your architecture of slides. I just was referring to how many different brands there are.
Mm-hmm. With the research that we've done, it's the top soft drinks in 2020. You'll see Coke is reigning supreme with 5 out of the top 10. Pepsi's still right in there with 4. However, with their slowing decline in the soft drink markets, we predict that will change relatively soon in the future. And of course, then you have the only pepper drink, Dr. Pepper, which with it being the only soft drink that it has coming in at 4, it's a mainstay. This slide shows within the you can see from 2004 to 2020 the slow, steady decline of Pepsi, their market share within the United States. So Pepsi is basically letting other companies take their market share, and they don't mind because they've got other business ventures that make them a lot of money.
Okay, now we've had a number of conversations about this. Heather, you've been part of those conversations. Rather than my explaining what this chart means, would you or somebody else on the team care to explain it? Okay, you want me to. Why do we see the PepsiCo share of the carbonated soft drink market declining? Bearing in mind that Indra Nooyi is a pretty smart lady. And Mrs. Nooyi recognized what we've talked about quite a bit already, and that is the health impacts of carbonated beverages, right? They can induce, what am I trying to say? Overweight and obesity. They can rot your teeth. You know, there's nothing terribly healthy about them. And so this category, not just for PepsiCo, but if we take a look at the industry or the markets, we'll see that the consumption of carbonated beverages declining over the long term. So Mrs. Nooyi decided that the smart move was to develop healthy beverages and other healthy products, and to concentrate marketing expenditures and investments on the categories of products that were growing, like non-carbonated beverages and bottled water and so forth, healthy products, products that are good for you, and let Coke spend large amounts of marketing expenditures to maintain what is essentially a pretty steady market share of a declining market. And PepsiCo says, well, go ahead, you can have a larger share of a declining market. We're not going to fight for a declining market. We'll stay in there and make it tough for you, Coke, because we want you to spend your money there while we spend our money where markets are growing. And I've always thought that that was an indication that Indra Nooyi was the smartest person in the industry, because she absolutely maneuvered Coke into this position and allowed PepsiCo gradually to let the market share decline because it was a declining category. Why fight for a loser? You know, better invest in a winner. And so what looks like a loss for PepsiCo isn't a loss, but rather it's a manifestation of Mrs. Nooyi's intelligence and her strategic smarts. Sorry to take so long. Doggone it.
And I was going to get into that in this next slide here. You'll see on the left-hand slide, on the left-hand side, it shows a graph of PepsiCo actually slowing down in the 90s, kind of plateauing with their market share in the 90s and early 2000. When Nooyi took over, I mean, they just straight dropped there, while allowing Keurig and Dr. Pepper to take their shares and Coca-Cola to rise up. However, with them still doing that, their returns are way higher than Coca-Cola ever has been. And you might be wondering, who is the guy on the top right? It is Donald Kendall. Yeah. The reason why I bring him into this mix is because he was a marketing genius and really pushed Pepsi and Coke to the limits in the soft drink industry. He was, like we said before, he was the first person to bring an American business into Russia. I actually sat down at the table with I believe Reagan and Khrushchev, I believe at one time, got them over there, got Pepsi started, and now it's over there. And he's also, if you look at the bottom right, is one that brought Michael Jackson into the fold with Pepsi. Even though that really didn't turn out well for Michael with his hair, but it made Pepsi a lot of money. So count that as a win. Next slide. The top snack food segment market. You might be wondering, why do I have Nestle up there? It's Nestle SA. Well, that's because when I walked down the snack food aisle in Walmart, all I saw was Nestle products, Mars products, and everything else. So I decided to add them in there. And you can see Nestle, with being a sole snack food company, is running away with the market at 1.15 billion. Pepsi comes in at a close second, and I say that moderately, with a 67.2 billion. Then it goes Mars with 35, Mondelez at 25.9, Kraft, General Mills, Kellogg. The surprising thing is these last three companies, Ferrero, SPA, Bimbo, and Congara, are all foreign brands. However, you see that they are still taking a big hold in the snack food market.
Yeah, Bimbo is a company in South America, and Conagra is a producer of products that go into baked products. Nestle is a little bit of a stretch to compare to PepsiCo. I'm sure you've seen that Nestle makes a whole lot more than beverages and snacks, and products that are used in cooking, and finished products that are not really snacks. So when we look at the $101 billion at Nestle, it's a big company, no doubt about it. Is it directly comparable to PepsiCo? I've got my doubts about that.
And this is just a better representation of, you see the snack market, how big Nestle is into the snack market, how much of that they gain, how much they control, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
The next slide is going to show where there's actually some new competitors going into the snack market. Everybody knows Dot's Home Styles Pretzels. Well, Hershey's now owns them, and they bought them for 1.2 billion. Hershey's also getting into the better for you snacks with Lily's Sweets LLC. It's a small better for you snack company out of Denver, Colorado. They purchase Amplify, Ripple Brands. Ripple Brands is known for their pork rinds, and Crave Food, Pure Foods. Bought both of them in 2015. I couldn't find the numbers for how much they would buy, how much they spent at that time, but I'm pretty sure it was quite a lot. Utes Brands bought Vincers, and they are a Chicago-based distributing company, but also in the snack food industry. So Utes is getting a better distribution company, and they bought them for 25 million. With this slide, with this next section, is just going to keep comparing with those three companies that we mentioned: Coca-Cola, Mondelez, and Pepsi. You'll see 9 times out of 10, or out of these slides, Mondelez is going to be at the very bottom because they only have snacks, and Pepsi has a good mix of both. So you'll see them mainly on top, and Coke is with the only with sodas. So you'll see Coke, how they're dipping with sodas slowly declining. Even though they're still making a lot of money, their sales are nowhere near compared to PepsiCo, as PepsiCo has consistently stayed at 70 million, or up there at 70 million. However, if you look at the operating margin, Pepsi stays right around there with Mondelez, as Coca-Cola operating margin is still very high. The reason why for that is Coca-Cola only makes the syrups and then sells the syrups to distributing companies, whereas PepsiCo does that with their Pepsi products. However, they're in the snack food industry too, so they have to eat that cost of doing all the distribution, the packaging, the printing, and all that for their snacks. So that's going to cut into their profit margins.
And the baking.
It's not for Coca-Cola.
And the
baking, yes, and that's also why
they have to manufacture the
Mondelez
product. They manufacture their bakery product, whereas in beverages, the bottler manufactures the product, right?
Mhm. Only thing the bottler does is just take the syrup, mix it with carbonated water, puts it in bottles and send it out. You'll see their return on invested capital. Coca-Cola and Pepsi stay right close together, whereas Mondelez stays very low. Mondelez is a really conservative company, in my opinion, so they're not really going to be spending a whole bunch investing, other than, as well Coke and Pepsi will. The return on equity, you'll see that Coca-Cola is staying slow. Basically, with any trends, if you see that Pepsi goes up, Coca-Cola will normally come up in that trend, but it will take them a whole lot longer. And Mondelez stays down at the bottom, coming in right around 10% in their ROE.
And we'll find out why on the next chart. Wayne, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate it for the people who are going to look at this video, if we could just drop back and explain again why it is that and you explained it, you covered it all. I just want to spell it out a little more deliberately so that the folks who watch the video don't miss it, because sometimes people just sit there and think they're paying attention when they're not. And this is a really important point. So, and you can sort of imagine there might be a test question about this sort of a thing. So why is it that Coke has higher operating profit margins than PepsiCo? Does that mean that Coke is more efficient, more successful in making profitable products than PepsiCo? Say no.
I would
say no.
Yeah, I would say no. I was going to say no. It's just that Coke does not have all the variable costs that Pepsi does when it comes to making the snack food products, the packaging the products, the manufacturing of the products, baking the products, and getting the products sent out. Well, Coca-Cola, only thing they have to do is just make the syrups for their drinks, send it to the bottling companies, and the bottling companies then take it from there. Pepsi does the same thing, but however, Pepsi's has to do all that I just said, the packaging, the baking, the marketing, and everything else for those snack foods. And that's not
Let's
cheap.
help let's help the people who are watching this video a little bit more. If we took PepsiCo and Coke and just compared the profitability of their beverage sales, we'd probably find them almost identical, because they make them the same way, out of the same products, and they distribute them the same way. And as you said, each company makes the concentrate, and then they sell that concentrate to the bottlers, who put the concentrate into bottles and cans along with water and sometimes sweetener, and then distribute it. So all the heavy operating costs are there in the bottler, not in the manufacturer of what am I trying to say, the concentrate. On the other hand, when we're talking about bakeries like Frito operates, Frito does everything that PepsiCo does at the concentrate level, and that its bottlers do at the manufacturing and distribution level, because it not only has to get the ingredients and mix them up and everything, it's got to bake them and put them in packages and put them in crates and get them delivered to the grocery store. So the cost structure is higher. Now we take a look at Mondelez, and what a good comparison would be if we had it to compare the operating profit of PepsiCo to Mondelez. Mondelez is real good at what it does. And the fact that it's able to get the kind of operating margin that it does compared to PepsiCo suggests to me that Mondelez is a pretty efficient manufacturer. We've taken a lot of time to do this, but I think it's really important, because people take a look at the operating margin in Coke and say, you see, Coke is so much more profitable than PepsiCo. And in fact, It's not. It's more profitable because of its product mix, but not because of its efficiencies.
I believe Sarah actually has those sales figures later on in the presentation, comparing the sales figures of just
Okay.
beverages and just snacks with Coke and Mondelez later
Okay.
on in there. And you'll see with the next slide, long-term debt. Mondelez actually has paid off a lot of their long-term debt, but as you can see, in 2020, all the companies rose in their long-term debt. And that is due to interest rates dropping so low and companies saying, what the heck, might as well get some money basically at a low rate when I can sell it and make more money doing that. The share equity, Mondelez stays on top. Well, Coke and Pepsi are at the bottom, but that's because both Coke and Pepsi have done stock buybacks in the recent years. And as you can see, both have stopped, so their stocks are coming back up. The invested capital looks like all these three companies stay right near each other with investing and using to build for future. However, the differences in leverage. You'll see that Mondelez is as I said earlier, a very conservative company, so their leverage is going to stay consistently low. However, Pepsi and Coke, with their sales being as they are, their leverage is normally high. But Pepsi's leverage is coming down while Coke leverage is going up. Could be because Pepsi's understanding that, hey, our leverage has been too high for too long. Let's get that down a little bit. While Coke is eating up more and more of that maturing and declining market of sodas.
All right, so next we'll be talking about the capabilities analysis. So we'll start with the life cycle analysis. So this is broken up into Pepsi's Fun for You, Better for You, and Good for You product markets. So first we have the Fun for You market. As you can see through the chart there, the arrow is pointing to maturity. It is in the mature life cycle stage. Fun for You products would include those classic soda pops that are starting to go out of style as consumers become more health conscious, causing it to reach the mature area of the cycle. Next, we have the Better for You. This is still, as you can see through the arrow, in the growth stage of the life cycle analysis. Better for You products would include those baked chips, 0-calorie drinks, and sport drinks with electrolytes added. These are continuing to increase in popularity. While they may not be the healthiest options, they're still obviously better for you, hence the name Better for You. And then we have the Good for You, which are most definitely in the growth stage of the life cycle analysis. These would include water, bottled water, the Naked Juice products, and Quaker Oat products. Again, as more countries shift into healthier eating, healthier lifestyle, Pepsi is really, gaining a foothold there and continuing to grow with those products. There are some numbers there. You can read them, but basically stating that in 2006, 70% was the fun for you, the bad stuff. And now in 2016, which was just about 5 years ago, that dropped to 50%, while the fun for you and the fun for you and the better for you went up to 50%. So it's about half and half. Next, we'll talk about the BCG analysis. We'll talk about stars, question marks, cash cows, and dogs. All right, so first we have the stars. The stars are the product with high market growth rate and high relative market share. So as you can see, we do have bottled water. Aquafina is for Pepsi, Dasani is for Coke. These are products that definitely have a high growth rate in the market, and they also hold a high market share. All right, then we have the question mark, also known as the venture products. These would be your probiotics, that's kombucha, which is Pepsi. And then we have the honest tea, that would be Coca-Cola. These are going to be high market growth rates with relative low market share at this time. All right, and then we do have the dogs. So I know this was a little controversial to put the dogs as Coke and Pepsi. But the way that I look at it, a dog has low market growth rate and low market share, while that may not be entirely true right now, right this second, for these type of products, so the colas, it will be very soon. They're definitely moving from a cash cow to a dog due to health concerns and people wanting to eat and drink healthier. So that is why I place them as dogs.
You can't hear me, but I'm clapping.
Well, because I argued back, yay.
And the reason is that you have added your own innovative thought as to why something's unusual. It's not a dog today, but it's going to be, and you've explained why. You may not appreciate this now, but I've put a few extra check marks on my notepad for you here, because
Well,
I
thank
thought
you.
that was a very intelligent rendering of this product, of this item.
Well, just to add a little bit on it, with the studies that we've done, especially the information that Heather
Oh, she
shared.
says, okay, in that case, I'll give you a little more.
Well, it's just the declining portions of it. I mean, it really, really is. I mean, technically right now you could call it a cash cow, but the way the market is growing downward, it will be a dog. So I appreciate that. Okay, sorry, you can go to the next one.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so then we have the cash cows. So the cash cows are going to be low market growth rate, meaning they're not growing, but they do hold a high market share. So these are just going to be your general snack foods. I have a picture there of Frito-Lay, which would be your chips, not the big chips or anything, but your good old just classic, chips. And then we have Kellogg's, which has Cheez-Its, Pringles, and then those are even the little Keebler fudge rounds.
Okay. If we were to go back here, where do you think these products are in their actual behavior today, right now?
As far as like market growth rate and market share?
Yeah, they're actually cash cows now, right?
Yes, yes.
But you see them headed to the right side of the matrix, and so they
Correct.
are becoming dogs.
Yes.
And I thought that was very perceptive. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so next we do have the 5 forces analysis, Porter's 5 forces.
Oh,
So we'll start with threat of new entrants. So the threat of new entrants currently is moderate moderately high due to moderate customer loyalty to established brands like Pepsi and Coca-Cola, and then high cost of brand development, such as research and development and marketing. You will see here shortly, once we go through all 5 of the forces, that I do have a scorecard that hopefully will explain this a little bit better.
okay.
All right, so now we have threat of substitutes is currently high. There is a strong threat of substitutes. There are options with high performance and high quality, such as products. If we're comparing Pepsi, we have Coke products and Mondelez products when it comes to beverages and snacks. Low switching costs for customers. It doesn't cost them anything different to change brands. And then there is a high availability of substitutes. Everywhere you go, you have one cabinet, with Coke products, one cabinet with Pepsi products, and they're the same cost. So it's pretty high at this time.
Okay, let's make sure that we know what substitutes are. And this is not me speaking, this is the way Porter wrote it. The substitute has to be from another industry, okay? Because the 5 forces is used to analyze an industry. So in the case of the carbonated beverage industry, what's a substitute for carbonated beverages?
Bottled water. So it is high.
Water would be a good example because it's a different industry. Milk,
Juices.
coffee, tea.
Yeah.
Depending on how far you want to go, vodka. But normally we wouldn't go that far. But what we can't do is say Pepsi is a substitute for Coke and Coke is a substitute for Pepsi, because they're in the same industry. It's the
Right.
same product. And what we're trying to do is find out what the profit potential of this industry is. And if there are other industries that can deliver to the consumer or the buyer the same or similar benefits, then that's competition for this industry. And that competition has a very real impact. That impact, as I've explained in Business 670, is to establish a price ceiling. So if our price is here and here comes the substitute, if the substitute's price is up here because it's a more luxurious type of clothing, for instance, that may not hurt us. On the other hand, if the substitute comes in and it's less expensive and it'll satisfy us just as much as the product up here, what does the product up here have to do to stay in the market? It has to bring its price down, right? So the substitute puts a ceiling. This is the way Porter wrote it. He described it as a ceiling, like in your house. That's the highest your price can go. If your price goes higher than the substitute's price, nobody's going to buy it because they get the satisfaction from the substitute, right? So why buy this product? No need to. Okay, so every time we see a substitute, that puts a ceiling on the price that our products can be offered for. Okay, and I don't think that we really get that from this slide. So if you have a chance to fix this slide, it might be a good thing. If you don't, I think that what I just did will make it okay for the people who watch this video. All right. And by the way, the threat of substitutes is in fact high because there are just lots of, everything from tea to coffee to water to juices and so forth. Yeah. Okay.
So now we have rivalry among existing competitors. So here I do have pictures of Coca-Cola and Mondelez.
That's
As you
okay.
can, okay. Yeah.
It's
So as you
okay this time.
Okay, so as you can see, Coca-Cola is rival in the beverage industry, and Mondelez is a rival in the snack industry. So I do have more on that next. All right, so here is kind of the numbers that Wayne was referring to earlier. This is a comparison against existing rivals in the beverage industry. So here I'm comparing the 2020 sales in US $1 million. So as you can see, Coca-Cola was at 33 billion, and then Pepsi was at 31, almost 32-ish billion dollars. And then here we are.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah.
And then this one, not so much though. So this is comparing the snack foods with existing rivals. So at the top left, those are Pepsi products there. 2020 sales, you have 38 billion, almost 39. And then 2020 sales for Mondelez, you have 26.5 billion. So a big difference there when you're looking at beverage versus snack. All right, now we do have bargaining power of buyers. This is also currently high, and there are low switching costs for switching products. They do have high access to product information. To me, this was an important one because as we become more health conscious, we do research more of what we input into our body. So you may have consumers who did at one time maybe drink Pepsi. Now they're getting more information about how bad it is for them, and they're switching. And again, there is also a high availability of substitutes. Now we have bargaining power of suppliers. There is a high overall supply, increases PepsiCo's options in acquiring new raw materials or access to raw materials. Low forward integration limits suppliers' control of PepsiCo's supply chain. Even with moderate size and large supply firms, bargaining power of suppliers is relatively low or weak.
Sure.
Here's the scorecard comparing the 5 forces in US, China, and India. So here I gave each of Porter's 5 forces a score of 1 to 5 and kind of averaged that out there at the bottom. So you can see the US is at a 3.8, China at a 3.4, India at a 3.2, which would indicate that the Asia market is kind of the best outlook currently for PepsiCo.
Well, if you're combining China and India as the Asian market, yeah. One of the things that impresses me, well, first, the most important thing is that you've correctly demonstrated how to do the 5 forces, how to evaluate it. And what we want is for everybody to learn how to do that. And I can tell you that in my career, running around the world, helping companies do their strategic planning, helping them enter new industries and new markets, I did this analysis. I actually did it. And sometimes I would have to do it on the fly, you know, with the back of an envelope. Other times we actually did research to find out, you know, what the character of these forces is. But we very often wanted to know which country, for instance, would be most attractive. So whether you out there in video land agree with Sarah's ratings, that's for you to decide. But you need to know that this is how we analyze the profit potential of an industry, and it works. If we, let's assume that Sarah has done 6 months of market research, and this is what she's come up with, and these numbers are absolutely right. The answer that we would come up, or the implication we would draw is, this is a pretty tight market, pretty tight industry. Yeah, India seems to have a little fewer forces that push profit down than the US, but we're talking about the difference between 3.2 and 3.8 on an average. And if you compare China and India, they're within shouting distance of each other. So what this says to me is that, you know, no matter which of these which one of these markets you're going to get into, you know, we're going to have a little bit more than moderate forces pushing profit down. There are some, depending upon which of these countries we want to go into, we need to frame our strategy accordingly. So Porter told us that we can use the 5 forces to assess the profit potential of an industry. But then what else did he do? He told us that once we've done the analysis, we should form strategy to respond to the strongest forces. So if we look at this analysis, in the US, we got to deal with those substitutes and the bargaining power of suppliers. And consequently, that's gonna force us to develop our strategy in a particular way. We're gonna, and the same is true incidentally for rivalry, you know, and Porter prescribed ways to frame strategy in those cases.
Okay, so I mean, this is just a brief summary there. I mean, you kind of touched on the majority of this, Professor, but rivalry among existing competitors in both snack and beverage industry is moderate across all 3 countries. For the US, you have, you know, brands like Mondelez, Coke. Those brands are also present internationally, but when you do business internationally, you also have to consider the forces for local, you know, existing rivals, new entries, bargaining power of suppliers. So it's definitely a lot to take into consideration. Chinese consumers value choice and variety. So that's definitely important to take into consideration. Again, based on the Porter's 5 forces analysis, my conclusion is that India is where PepsiCo should focus going forward.
And that's a valid conclusion based on the analysis.
So here we have Professor Roney's favorite person. We have Ms. Indra Nui, former CEO of PepsiCo. This slide is mainly about the critical success factors, including leadership, management, and planning. So as we have already mentioned, Ms. Nui, she was the one who came up with the fun for you, better for you, good for you slogan, while the Coke and other companies were still focused on trying to save the cola market. She said, let's do something different. Let's focus on healthier brands. Let's make a change. And that did move the company toward healthier products. So while they did lose market share in the old Coke or old cola market, they gained new market share in new ventures. So she definitely had a huge impact on the company. All right, here we have critical success factors, research and development of new products and flavors. So currently, and I found this very interesting, Pepsi-Cola is working with Amazon to create artificial intelligence systems. These AI systems are going to be used to test new products and flavors that consumers may like, and then kind of move forward with those based on those results. So I found that very interesting. We've also got some advertising and promotion. Pepsi-Cola is huge on their advertising and promotion. Currently, they're increasing their marketing toward millennials and Gen Z generations. They're doing that through a combination of TV, digital, social media, out-of-home, augmented reality, and charitable giving marketing. And the next slide follows up on that just a little bit more. So in Snapchat right now, Doritos is doing a campaign called Another Level. What they did is they actually removed the Doritos logo and they put that as a Snapchat lens, and basically the person's face becomes a Dorito, and it encourages the user to create what's called their own brand content, which is really big right now with the younger generations. It kind of gives them opportunity to make their own Doritos ad.
I'm old. I've never heard of that.
You should download Snapchat, Professor Roney.
Yeah, I guess I have to. I'm really out of touch.
All right, so continuing with critical success factors, we do have nutrition and biochemistry. Pepsi-Cola uses nutrition and biochemistry to produce healthier products. They simplify their labels to make it easier for consumers to understand, as that is becoming more important to consumers, along with recognizable ingredients. People like to know what they're eating, especially with the increase of things like celiac disease where people can't eat gluten. Those recognizable ingredients and simple labels make that a lot easier for consumers. And then we also have convenient products with positive nutrition, such as our naked juices.
And how do they come up with these new products?
I would assume through their research and development. So that would
Yeah,
go
and
back.
all those laboratories we were talking about earlier.
We do have more coming on your laboratories, yes, sir.
Okay, well, good.
All right, so here we do have more critical success factors. This is mainly about the power of one, which is a grocery chain relationship or CRM project. This is a picture of Indra Nui again. So she was the one who came up with Power of One. So basically it's where Pepsi acquired their two largest bottlers, Pepsi Bottling Group and Pepsi Americas, creating a trifecta of sorts called the Power of One. This merger made PepsiCo the largest food and beverage business in North America and the second largest in the world. So it had them working directly with their bottlers and their local grocery chains to distribute their products.
How do you and I experience the power of one? When we go into the grocery store, in the old days, you could find soft drinks in one place and snack foods in the other. After the power of one, PepsiCo worked it out with the grocery store chain so that on one side of the aisle would be the beverages, and on the facing aisle, on the same aisle, on the facing side would be the snack foods. So if you or I go to the grocery store because we want to get stuff for the weekend or for a party, or to watch a football game, and we're going to have some people in, you're going to get some snacks and you're going to get some soft drinks, and you know you're going to need them, and there they are together. So you don't have to go look for the other. When you find one, you find them both. And the grocery store chain will have some signs or something that'll point you to them, that will have some kind of a promotion, and PepsiCo will pay for that. And PepsiCo will provide joint advertising money to the grocery store chain to make people aware of the beverages and the snack foods. So you see one ad on TV, and right after it, you see an ad for the other product. And all of that is the power of one. It combines the appeal of beverages and snack foods, and it takes it right into the grocery chain, grocery store aisle. That's the power of one. So successful was it that it's still in use today.
Okay, so here we do have Porter's Diamond. So Porter's Diamond includes the firm's strategy, structure, and rivalry, demand conditions, related and supporting industries, and factor conditions. So here we do have the factor conditions. So factor conditions affecting PepsiCo would include their infrastructure, their capital resources, their human resources, their scientific knowledge, their natural resources. And this here is just a picture of one of their bottling companies and their laboratories. So those would be included in the infrastructure as a factor condition. Demand conditions. So this is some information about the carbonated soft drink, including cola, citrus, and other market. So the global market value as of 2021 is 237 billion US dollars. The estimated growth rate is a compounded annual growth rate, or CAGR, of 4.7% from 2021 to 2028. So this is all about the market and how big it is and how it is expected to grow. Here we have demand conditions. So this is a global snack food market. Currently, the global snack food market is valued at 427 approximately US billion dollars in 2020. The CAGR of the snack industry is 3.37% during 2021 to 2026. Asia Pacific is the largest market currently, and Asia Pacific is forecasted to be the largest growing market between 2021 and 2026. And there on the left, you just have some pictures of the largest companies. Sorry about that. You can go forward. All right, so here we have Porter's Diamond related industries. So some related industries that would directly affect PepsiCo would include the trucking industry and the bottling industry. So we've already briefly discussed the relationship directly with the bottling industry and locations and how they directly affect the beverage industry. And here again, we do have rivalry. So very similar to what we've already discussed in Porter's Five Forces. However, this slide does include some pictures of maybe some not so well-known companies. So of course, you've got Mondelez down there and Coca-Cola. We've got Dr. Pepper and Snapple, but we also there on the left have the Great India Taste of Campa, which is a local cola company in India. And then we have Britvic Soft Drinks, which operates out of the UK.
Okay, and let's all remember that Porter's Diamond treats rivalry differently than in the Five Forces. In the Five Forces, as rivalry goes up, profit potential goes down, and it's a straight line relationship. It's a direct relationship. In the Diamond, it's a curvilinear relationship, like an upside down U. So as rivalry goes up for a while, that enhances the competition and forces companies to raise the level of their game, their capabilities to compete. But as rivalry continues to increase, companies become more desperate and they behave less rationally. They don't invest in the future. They cut prices. It's like dogs fighting in the street over a scrap of meat. So when an industry gets really rivalrous, it's not raising the quality of the industry in that country, because Porter's Diamond was meant to assess the potential, the growth potential, and the potential of an industry to be healthy in a particular country. So as rivalry goes up, that forces companies to play a better game. But if rivalry gets too intense, it reverses, and companies no longer are thinking of the future. They're just fighting for the present. And so what we're looking for in Porter's Diamond is moderate rivalry, whereas in Porter's Five Forces, we're looking for low rivalry. And so rivalry behaves differently in these two models.
Okay, so here I do also have another scorecard, this time for Porter's Diamond, comparing the US, China, India, and Europe this time. So here on a scale of 1 to 5, I've compared all 4 of Porter's Diamond's areas against across the countries. So as you can see, the US is relatively high there, and then it starts to go down in China. India is the lowest, with Europe kind of in the middle there with a 4. Based on this information, and just like Professor Roney just said, we definitely want to see moderate rivalry because it will create a price war if it becomes too high. So again, here, based on this, we've come to the conclusion that India would be the market to focus on.
No. Industry offers the least support to the to PepsiCo's industry, right? Because unlike the 5 forces, each one of the forces in Diamond is a positive. So if the score for the Diamond goes up, the chances that an industry will be healthy in a particular country are better. And if we want to choose a country to go into, to start to begin a new company in a particular industry, we'd like to choose the country that is most supportive of that industry, right? If we're already in that country, we want to take a look at the forces that will propel the company's growth. And again, Porter's Diamond will help us see which of those forces are going to propel companies in that industry to higher growth. And to the extent that a company is in a country in an industry that's relatively new, if a company is in a country that promotes the growth of an industry, in this case, it's the US, then that means that a company that starts in that country is going to be able to build its strength faster and then grow into other countries, okay? If a company starts in a country that doesn't offer as much economic support to an industry, then it could still locate there, but it's not going to build strength as fast as it would in another country. So if you got 2 companies in the same industry, one is in an industry that gets a low score on Porter's Diamond, and another gets a high score, the chances are that the company that's in the country with a high score is going to build enough strength that it's going to be able to move into other countries and get a higher global market share because it's built that strength in the first country. And that's why Porter developed this model.
Okay, so this is just summarizing Porter's Diamond. It discusses the demand conditions have been relatively low in India, but are expected to increase over the next 5 years. So if we take what Professor Roney said with the success in the United States and the success in China, and the expected growth there in India, the outlook does look good. Moderate rivalry allows for market growth without creating price wars. And then PepsiCo, again, should focus on the Southeast Asia market, specifically India, as the market share for the beverage and snack food industries will continue to grow. And this is just summarizing the entire industry structure as a whole. So again, PepsiCo operates in 2 separate industries. They have the beverage industry and the snack industry. Both beverage and snack industries have products in mature markets and growth markets. Rivalry for PepsiCo is intense in both the beverage and snack industries. However, differentiation is extremely important for them to remain successful. And through PepsiCo's Good For You and Better For You products, they aim to remain differentiated, and that will keep them separate from their rivals. And I believe I have a little bit more here. So again, just talking about the focus should be on South Asia, India being the market of the future, China is the market of the present. Consumer demand is expected to grow significantly in India over the next 5 years. The increased market size in India means that Pepsi can capitalize on the beverage and snack food markets, while research and development departments being operated locally for international business will also help because it will ensure that needs are met culturally and individually.
Wow. Sarah, do you know that you have covered 33 slides?
I know, and I'm out of water, but
Oh my gosh. Oh, I don't know about you, but I'm worn out.
Good job, Sarah.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to be looking at PepsiCo's marketing capabilities. And I would like to start with Russia. Interesting story about how PepsiCo came into Russia. At the time, Donald Kendall, excuse me, was the international operations manager, I believe was his title. He and Richard Nixon were associates, or I guess you can loosely use the term friends, I think. I'm not quite sure how close they actually were, but he had been wanting to get into Moscow apparently for quite some time. And President Nixon at the time was heading over to Moscow for the US National Exhibition. And when he went, Donald had managed to convince him to take some Pepsi with him. So of course, the president of the United States brings over all these gifts. One of them happens to be Pepsi, and it's a huge hit. And as you can see from the slide, just some little tidbits here, you know, it's been there for 62 years now. It was the first Western consumer product to be made and sold in the Soviet Union. And currently it employs about 19,000 people. Next slide, please, sir. But the fun part about it is that through this deal, Pepsi at one point in time actually could have potentially had some military power. In the beginning, as Dr. Roney had mentioned, the ruble in Russia was not worth anything on the international market, and also the people in Russia, they were not permitted to own or trade any foreign currency. But what they did have a lot of was vodka. So Pepsi entered into a deal with the Soviet Union where they could trade certain amounts of vodka for the Pepsi-Cola syrup. When that deal began to fall through, as Dr. Roney's clapping, when that deal began to fall through, Russia came back with a counteroffer, and Pepsi became the brief owner of 3 warships, 17 submarines, and a handful of tankers.
Oh, well.
So most interesting for sure. PepsiCo in India, they've been there since 1989. And something a little unique about India, if you look here at the gentleman holding the Mountain Dew bottle, his name is, I'm going to try to pronounce it properly. I think it's Hrithik Roshan. He is a very famous actor in India. He's often portrayed in a lot of the Bollywood movies. He's known for his dance moves. But the neat thing about Mountain Dew in India is that it has this presence of being made for India. A lot of their advertisements feature people doing extreme sports or something very active, and they're always drinking Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
So thought that was kind of neat. And then next slide, please, sir.
Just before we do,
Oh.
Kakuri that you see on the screen is a source of pride for PepsiCo India. It was developed by the PepsiCo India staff, and they did it without the benefit of one of those PepsiCo laboratories because they didn't have a PepsiCo laboratory, but they felt that there was a particular type of flavor for snacks that appealed to people in India. They developed this product all by themselves. And lo and behold, it was a tremendous success. And I believe that eventually it went to a couple other countries. But Kurkuri is most definitely a product that was developed by PepsiCo India for India, which picks up on what Heather said. Lots of advertising meant to focus on the local culture and local tastes. Now I flipped it.
PepsiCo in Asia and Japan. PepsiCo's big marketing, specifically in Japan, is the wide variety of specialty flavors with the Pepsi drinks. They have ones that are seasonal. They have some for special occasions. I believe this pink, if it's not this pink one, it's one in the background. There is a drink that they came out with for the Cherry Blossom Festival, for example. And of course, in the Asian and Japan cultures, they have very specific tastes. You're going to find a lot of seafood flavors. I believe the Lay's bag there is a Peking duck flavor, for example. But of course, the packaging is still very traditional, PepsiCo and Lay's. So you know who made it. And then next slide, please, sir. This is going to be some of your PepsiCo Europe products. Neat thing here is you have the Walker's chips. This is actually a line of the patriotic bags that they did. Down in the bottom right corner, we have these are like a nut snack, and they have like some kind of little bready, crunchy coating on them. And then up at the top right, we have some juices that are made primarily for the European market.
Yeah, the Duivus is in Holland.
Duivus, thank you for pronouncing that.
And Walker's, of course, was for a long time a very traditional British brand. And when PepsiCo got Walker's, they got the leadership of the snack food business in the UK, just like that. All it takes is money.
This is just a nice infographic that I found. It shows just different flavors and where you can find them around the world. It kind of gives a really nice snapshot of what, different people like in different areas. Something I thought was interesting, down in Australia, we have the Vegemite chips. Not a particular fan of Vegemite, but more power to them. And naturally in the United States, we tend to favor, for example, the more classic chip, bag of Lay's and a Pepsi. What could be better, right? These are a couple of examples of some of the PepsiCo ventures that have been in the works. Most recently, they acquired Rockstar Energy Drinks. But more interesting than that, and I don't know that I'm going to go into much detail with it again later on, so I'll talk about it now. The Beyond Meat and PepsiCo partnership. They have come together to form what they call the Planet Partnership. And so it's a joint venture that's going to help develop and produce innovative, marketable snacks and beverages that are made from plant-based proteins. So it's just another example of how I guess PepsiCo is aware of the health conscious manner that people are moving to. They see that there's an opportunity there to, I suppose, make revenue from development of more healthy snacks and foods. So kind of moving away, from depending solely on the soda. All right. Okay. Next slide, please, sir. These are some sites that I'm sure we're all familiar with, marketing capabilities and their media advertising. PepsiCo media is everywhere. You see it on buses, billboards, their soda machines are everywhere. You go to a hot dog stand or grill, you're likely to see a PepsiCo sign or PepsiCo banners hanging, advertising specials, combos, you name it. Commercials, we see them on TV and online. I actually ran across one on YouTube the other day. It was kind of interesting. Next slide, please, sir. PepsiCo has a rich history of media advertising. These are some of the older ones. The ones there to the right and in the middle are kind of from like the 50s and 60s. And then as we move into like the 70s and 80s, we start to see, there's one right here. It's from Japan. It shows a couple. It's like they're celebrating maybe a birthday. But if you'll notice, and even in all of these more vintage advertisements, the people on them are young. These are younger people. PepsiCo is known for marketing to the younger generation, whereas Coca-Cola, if you notice in their media, especially around the holidays, they emphasize, you know, the polar bears and the family. They market more towards a family setting, where PepsiCo, you know, is the new, young, hip, everything that's happening right now.
Very
Next.
perceptive. Notice that in the image on the right, you see the nickel?
Yes.
Okay. Here it goes. PepsiCo was the very first. Get ready for this. You're never going to forget it. PepsiCo was the first one to use media advertising on the radio. Back in the old days when we didn't have TVs, we had radios. As a kid, I didn't have a TV. There wasn't any TV. So I sat in front of the radio in the living room and listened to programs on the radio, all sorts of programs. And then an advertisement would come on. It was a jingle, and it went like this. Pepsi-Cola hits the spot, 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much twice as much for a nickel too. Pepsi-Cola is the one for you. Nickel, 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 nickel. And so that's how the ad went. Pepsi-Cola hits the spot, 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel too. Pepsi-Cola is the one for you. Nickel, 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 nickel. So that's it. And you see the nickel over on the right? That's part of the advertising theme that came together. See, I told you would remember it. Next
That's
slide.
awesome. International marketing or media advertising. I'm over to the left, the Doritos and Lay's and Cheetos that look like they're on fire. That's actually a billboard that is in India. But PepsiCo, as I'll talk in the next slide also, they're known for using celebrities. So here we have advertisements for China at the top, Japan at the bottom. They will use celebrities from K-pop singers to K-dramas, actors, actresses. And it's interesting to see the similarities. If you'll go to the next slide, please, sir. Because we do the same thing here. They advertise with people that the younger generation are going to recognize and relate to and probably hold, you know, to a higher regard. So naturally, if they're drinking Pepsi or eating certain snacks and things like that, then that generation is going to want to do the same thing. Next slide, please. Just another example, we've got even the Muppets get in on it. I thought that was kind of cute. With eating Lay's, and it looks like that was one of the early advertisements for baked Lay's. And then of course over to the right we have Beyonce with her cart full of Pepsi. And now I'm going to talk about their distribution channels. PepsiCo has a 3-channel network. They use direct to store delivery, customer warehouse, and third-party distributors. And as you can see, that's a picture, an example of a PepsiCo warehouse. What I have here about the push promotional strategy and the pull promotional strategy, what I've noticed with the research is that PepsiCo uses both. So with the push promotional strategy, that involves Pepsi will take the product directly to the customer, which plays directly into these 3-channel networks. I mean, Pepsi's everywhere. Like I said, you'll see it in stores, you'll see it at sporting events. It's going to be in your face, on the TV, on billboards, everywhere. The pull method is more of a way of motivating customers to seek out your brand and be active in the process. So with some of the, like I said, I know personally I've been to sporting events and PepsiCo may sponsor a dunking booth or some event like that, but it also again ties back in with the way that they advertise, is that they've just put the product in your face. They show you all of these celebrities that are consuming the product, and it just kind of pulls you in because you want to be part of that. It looks fun. It looks, you know, great. I want to be part of the cool crowd, I guess.
Huh.
So just some information on some market share trends here. As I mentioned, they did have $23 billion brands under their belt. Again, in August, they sold Tropicana. So now we're looking at 22. But they are sold in 200 plus countries. They've got almost 300,000 employees, more than 7 billion in net revenue, and more than $10 billion in operating profit. Next slide, please, sir. This is specifically about the North American division and the market share trends. At the time that this was made, Tropicana, of course, was still on here. So you've got, your Pepsi, Mountain Dew, Gatorade, Tropicana, and Starbucks. The ready-to-drink Starbucks that you see in the stores, were within the top 5. For Frito-Lay, we had Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos, Ruffles, and Tostitos. And then, of course, in Quaker Foods, we had the traditional Quaker Oat, Captain Crunch cereal, and the Rice-A-Roni. Next slide, please, sir. All right, and then just some more information on their priorities in North America with market shares. One of the things I found interesting was the comment on the bottom about the e-commerce. So it says that, they're going to leverage COVID-driven channel growth to continue sales and share momentum while building capability to support competitive advantage. And if we think back to one of the earlier slides that I was explaining with the trends in the snack foods in home going up and out of home going down, and then the trends with the sodas when they were kind of, they weren't nosediving yet, but there was a decline of even the in-home, definitely a decline with the out-of-home. That e-commerce, that just means that their snacks are more readily available online. They can order them. You can go on Amazon and order a bag of Lay's or a case of Lay's. I know that I can go to websites and even order Walker's chips and have them imported. So, all right, next, please, sir. We're going to talk a little bit about production and research and development. So these are some of the goals that PepsiCo has really focused on in the past few years. They have goals for their products, for agriculture, for packaging, and for water. There's some information here, particularly.
Oops, do you want to?
It's okay. Perfect timing.
Okay.
So for the agriculture, they are working very hard to make sure that they do adequate background checks with their farmers. They want to make sure that their products are being sustainably sourced. They're also working with farmers, everyone from the large commercial guys to the individual farmers and their personal family farms, to make sure that they are developing new technology for the farming process across the board. They're also looking at, for their products, to go back to what Ms. Nguyi had done with the 3 categories, reducing sugars, sodiums, and saturated fats in the products across the board as well, to build for that future market where people are going to eventually kind of probably get off soda completely with the way the trends are going. Let's see. Interesting enough, for their packaging, they are looking at developing packaging, and I'll talk about this again with one of their partnerships. Packaging that's biodegradable and more friendly for the planet, not only after it's used, but while it's also being produced. For water, they're trying to be sustainable with the water, make sure they use it more efficiently. They don't have a lot of water waste. And then next slide, please, sir. And then this was really neat. This is PepsiCo Labs. So one of the things that PepsiCo has done is that they have started pulling in entrepreneurs and small businesses or startups that are just getting into the market or trying to break into the market, and kind of guide them through. They'll take your product, they'll bring it in, and they'll test it against the market in the real world in real time. And if it does well, if they see a potential for it, they will then partner with you to produce that product and get it out to the market to be sold and traded. And I think it's a really great opportunity. It just shows that PepsiCo is definitely more than just their snacks and their soda. Next slide, please, sir. This is a map showing primarily their production and research and development locations. I apologize, I couldn't get a more detailed view here. The little home base there, that is actually the PepsiCo headquarters. But it maps a good illustration of showing just how many locations there are and the fact that they are all around the world. Next, perfect. They have a whole team of health and nutrition sciences. It includes health and nutrition sciences, engineers, doctors, you name it. These people are on here. They're nutrition experts that are working to make the snacks obviously healthier, more sustainable. Next slide, please, sir. This is going back to what I was mentioning about the packaging. PepsiCo has been working with Danomere Scientific to make more environmentally friendly and biodegradable resins so that things such as their bottles will not sit in a landfill as long as they do now. And next slide, please. This also is going back to some environmental scientific resources where they're working with the water. Right now, excuse me. One of the things I found interesting here with the water and the plastics is that their goal is to cut virgin plastics per serving by 50% across their global food and beverage portfolio. So what that means is, making the bottles either out of a material that is not solely plastic or using a large amount of recyclable plastics.
So as we continue with the capability analysts, as you can see right here, I started off with an organizational chart. I started off with the CEO of PepsiCo, which his name is Ramon Laguerta. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. This diagram visually conveys PepsiCo internal structure. PepsiCo is broken down, as you can see, into 3 subcategories. PepsiCo American Food, PepsiCo American Beverages, as well as PepsiCo International. Each of these 3 categories are broken down more. PepsiCo's American Food, as we talked about earlier, acquired with Frito-Lay's North America, Latin American Foods, as well as Foods of North, sorry about that. So then as you continue over, we have PepsiCo American Beverages, which is also broken down into 2 subcategories. And we also have PepsiCo International, which is broken down into 2 subcategories as well. You can go to the next slide. So the next few slides, we will be discussing the operands and operants in beverage and snack category of PepsiCo. Just to give you a breakdown so you can differentiate between the 2, operand resource represents tangible assets, for example, like economic resources, as well as products and raw materials, whereas operants, they focus more so on like intangible and, and shaped out of knowledge and capacities. If you look on this slide, as we discussed earlier, in products and beverages such as Pepsi and Gatorade and Mountain Dew and Aquafina, they make up the largest revenue earnings of the PepsiCo empire. We also talked about how PepsiCo acquired Frito-Lay, and one thing that I thought was pretty interesting was learning that they actually use a laser to hit the chips to listen to the sound coming from the chip to determine the texture. If you can go to the next slide, please. So on this slide, we continue to discuss the operands and how it relates to PepsiCo beverages and snacks. PepsiCo Beverage North America make and distribute licensed products from Dr. Pepper to Ocean Spray to their Quaker products as well. Go to the next slide. So getting into the operands of beverages and snacks as it relates to PepsiCo. On this slide, I'm sorry, as it relates to PepsiCo, as you can see here, I started talking about Quaker Foods. Oh, wait, go down one. No,
You wanted me to go down one, you said?
Yeah, it was the Quaker one with Quaker up there. Yes, So on this one, we are discussing, like I said, wait, I'm sorry. I think I got off. I'm sorry, yes. So on this one, we're still talking about the operands of PepsiCo as well. So on the left side, I talked about a division and including their partnership with tea variants, like I talked about earlier when I said like Dr. Pepper, and from their different juices, from ocean spray to cranberries and etc. And now you can go to the next slide. Sorry about that. So now we will be talking more so about operands and how it relates to PepsiCo. So just to kind of tell you about operands, operands is one of the, they specify which items should be affected by the action when it comes to operands. Any of the following data items can be used as operands, such as like functions, constant variables, and anything in that category. What I talked about with beverages and snacks on this slide, on the beverages, I talked about the design and the execute experiments and how to analyze, interpret data to make the sound technical recommendations on product and processes and process. And then in the snack side, as you can see, I put lead development for the quality product improvement and productivity initiatives. The next slide. So this slide is just talking about the operands worldwide. Not to read the whole slide, but as you can see, and as we talked about earlier as well, it includes Europe, Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. So this slide is talking about the critical success factors as it relates to PepsiCo. We're going to be discussing the client, process, technology, and the people. Next slide. So, sorry about that, I'm looking at my notes. So with the critical success factor in market share, so the large scale distributors such as PepsiCo and Coca-Cola, which is their rival, they're both able to benefit from economies of scale and from substantial reduction in their business risk. This results in distribution being another key factor for companies' future success. With the absence of effective distribution channels, PepsiCo will not be able to actually reach a wide range of wholesale stores, making it more difficult to achieve the high volume sales and large market share.
Okay, here, I've got to step in.
Okay.
The market share is not a critical success factor. Okay, market share is the result of critical success factors. Again, to take it back to 670, a critical success factor is a functional capability. It is what the company is capable of doing and distinguishes winners from losers in competition. So usually there are not very many of them. In my lecture on critical success factors, I think I told you that in just about 45 or 50 years of doing professional work and strategic planning, I never found a company with 9 critical success factors or an industry with that many. Rarely does it get up to 6 or 7. And there are reasons for that because these things occur in combinations. But most important for this break, and for those of you who are listening to this video, market share is not a critical success factor. It is the result of critical success of a company enjoying a critical success factor. So if a company's got particular critical success factor like PepsiCo's research and development, which is a critical success factor, or those media capabilities that Heather talked about, okay, that separate PepsiCo from its rivals, though, and the capability to produce or obtain or develop that kind of media distinction that those capabilities result in, among other things, higher market share, higher sales, higher profitability. So in this particular case, the best thing to do, frankly, is to delete this slide. I'll leave it up to you whether you care to take the time to do that. But in any event, market share is not a critical success factor. It's a result of critical success factors.
Okay. So the critical success factor of product quality.
That's a critical success factor.
Okay, so PepsiCo, their main goal and mission is to make sure that their customers and consumers are happy, as I mentioned earlier in the mission and vision statement. So this means that it is important to make sure that they have great quality products. Like I said in the previous slide, what I thought was interesting about them shooting the laser on their chips to make sure that the texture is what they want. So they're making sure that they take the extra steps, you know, that they need to take in order to make sure that they're producing the right type of quality food and beverages. Next slide. So on this slide, we discussed the critical success factor of the financial position. Something that I found was that back in July of this year, PepsiCo, they actually reported that their quarterly revenue rose more than 20% from a year earlier as restaurants' demand for their drinks returned from the COVID when everything was closed down. This company also raised its outlook for a full year adjusting earnings per share growth as well.
Okay.
Okay, so on the next slide, we will be talking about the critical success factors in the global expansion. PepsiCo has the largest food and beverage supplier in Russia, and they are also investing more than $4 billion in China in hopes to double that revenue in China market. So on this slide, as you can see, PepsiCo, sorry about that. So on this slide, you can see PepsiCo generates 80% of its operating profits outside of the United States. So
however, again, this is a result of capabilities that are exceptional, right? So I think we're seeing a lot of results rather than the capabilities, the critical success factors themselves. So this is something that, as those of you who are watching this video need to keep in mind. Very often what we're seeing here are results rather than the capabilities themselves. Now, when Jaleesa mentioned the device that measured how the Frito-Lay chip crackled, that was a critical success factor that resulted in better quality. So that's a real one, and it's probably technology that would that is the category it would fall into. 80% of its operating profit outside the United States is the result of a critical success factor, which is probably somewhat related to international marketing or the ability to conduct international operations. But just remember that critical success factors are functional capabilities. By functional, I mean the ability to do the operations in the company, not the necessarily intellectual, but what you really do to produce the product, to develop it, to distribute it, and so forth. It has to be something that's actually done that is a basic function. Okay, employee efficiency. That can be a critical success factor.
Okay, and so reading from the slide, as you can see, PepsiCo, they do employ more than 14 times the number of employees than Dr. Pepper and Snapple, and almost twice the number of Coca-Cola, which, as we mentioned before, is their rival. This number of employees, this could be lacking efficiency. So like you said, I think that this was a critical success factor for them because they are able to, acquire more employees than the rival.
Yeah, maybe if they employ so many people, they're not efficient, right?
Right.
So you think PepsiCo might not be efficient, might not have employee
Well,
efficiency because they got so many employees.
it's a possibility, yes.
Okay,
So on the sales, critical success factor as it relates to sales.
and here we have the same thing. Sales are the result of critical success factors such as marketing capability, the ability to develop new novel products and so forth. Advertising is a critical success factor.
Okay, so as we talked, I think Heather mentioned this a lot in her slides as it relates to advertisement. In 2019, Coca-Cola invested some of 816 million US dollars in advertising in the United States, whereas PepsiCo's ads expenditures reached roughly $1.73 billion that same year. I'm going to discuss this a little later as well, but with their advertisements, as you see, they're very big with using advertisements on not just like billboards, as we discussed, but they also are good with using advertisements on commercials. They're really big when it comes to like the Super Bowl games and using anything as it relates to like celebrities and like the NFL and, anything related to that category. So on this slide, we have the critical success factor sustainability. Before I start, I want to make sure that this is considered a critical success factor. So in 2012, PepsiCo unveiled the world's first plant-based PET bottle, 100% recyclable. They also talked about PepsiCo, how they developed a plant-based bottle, which is 70% petroleum-based and 30% sugarcane-based to be used all plastic packaging. Another thing that's sustainability with them using in 2012, PepsiCo was recognized by the DJSI and CDJ for promoting sustainable business practices.
That's 10 years ago, but again, our technical abilities could end up producing sustainability. Okay, the report.
So this right here, So this right here is the critical success factor report card. So what we did as a team, we rated each category on a scale of 1 to 5 based off of the information provided. So as you can see, we came up with a higher average for PepsiCo, which was 4.5, whereas Coke was 2. I'm sorry, I can't see that. It's 2.83. I think that's what it says. So the summary and the strengths and weaknesses of PepsiCo. So under the strengths, we have that they are known as one of the best global brands. They're highly diversified portfolio. They have over 70 laboratories. They're shareholder friendly. They have a strong global presence as well as strong leadership. Celebrity sponsorships, like I mentioned earlier, like with the commercials and using celebrities for their advertisements. And also I found out that they have a healthy seaweed products, which is China-based. Some of their weaknesses include products perceived as unhealthy. So like some of their high soft drinks, containing such high sugar, which can be considered a weakness. Their poor environmental record, their high leverage, which Wayne discussed earlier in the PowerPoint, which can have a higher risk. And they're also named as one of the top 3 plastic polluters. And lastly, we have the controversial advertisements. And the reason why this is considered a weakness is because they were recently in the news, as I think I discussed this before, with one of the Kendall Jenner. She had a controversial commercial advertisement. So the next slide. So this slide is just the contents introducing to the next part of the slides. We're going to be discussing the goals, the financial goals, and the strategy. In contents continued, we will also be talking about the implementation priorities.
Going into this is going to be their financial projections and outlooks. Looking at going back over all of the data that we looked at, we felt that their growth rate could be at a 1.25%. However, that's putting it on more of our conservative end. I personally believe that that Pepsi is going to grow at a higher rate with bringing in the newer, healthier for you, better for you trends. And with India and China really growing, I believe that their sales are just going to take off. As you can see here, we project by 2025 sales hovering around $85 billion, which is for a food, snack, and food industry. That's outstanding. The operating margin, we again at the 1.25%, a little bit of a conservative guess or projection for us, as long as with the return on invested capital and the ROE projections. With the stock buybacks coming off, I believe that the ROE will increase over this time frame. Next slide, please. With the long-term debt, you'll see how it has a big dip in 2021. I believe that is from them selling Tropicana and Naked Juice for $3.3 billion. So they're going to take that money straight to long-term debt, and that's going to knock it down. Their equity, we see that rising again, going back up to where it was once, around the 20 billion mark. That's due with the sales increasing and also the stock buybacks stopping. Invested capital, we see that going up as well as interest rates stay low, and also doing better projects, investing more money into the better for you, and with that coming back towards the company to help them out. And with all this coming together, their leverage, we are seeing a steep decline, and I believe that that's going to happen with them using less debt to finance their company, and that come down to more respectable rates, get away from that 70%, and which will make more investors feel even better about coming into a company with such high sales but having a low leverage rate to invest in. Here is the financial goals that we have here. As you can see, the actual in sales were 70 billion. I project that to easily get up to 84 or 85 billion within this next 5 years, given that a 21% growth rate over this time, which that's just, like I said, put this at a conservative rate. I believe this will be actually a whole lot higher. The operating profit margin growing at a 5.11%, return on investment growing at 5%, and ROE growing at 4%. But what really is going to help them out with the long-term debt coming down 15%, which will grow their equity by 47% within the same time frame. And the leverage dropping, like I said, 11.7 points in that time.
That's a nice, bright chart. Good looking chart.
Thanks, sir. Coming into that, we said, like I said, cutting ties. They have, I believe this is going to be more of Pepsi looking back into their inner portfolio and realizing they have some companies within their portfolio that they can really do away with and still grow. So you see Tropicana and Naked both being sold in August of this year, but for $3.3 billion to PAI Partners, which is a private French equity firm. What they're going to do with that, I couldn't tell you, but that is a big drop in their long-term debt.
Right.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about PepsiCo's strategy. Next slide, please, sir.
Okay, I'm trying to take a note. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Well, no, don't be. I'm sorry. I should have been more responsive.
So under the umbrella of the generic strategies, the two that PepsiCo seems to focus most on are cost leadership and differentiation. And it's just to preface what you're getting ready to see, it's a little bit of a mix of both. So you might want to call it a hybrid differentiation low cost strategy maybe. Next slide, please, sir. So with the differentiation strategy, obviously PepsiCo has a broad differentiation, but what's unique in their product lines is that everything they do right now is related to food. So another aspect of that, of course, going back to what Ms. Nguyen had developed, they are all food items, but there are the three categories: the fun for you, better for you, and good for you. Next slide, please, sir. It's also the ingredient differentiation between the similar products when compared to their competitors. So if you've ever been in the store and you notice you got the Pepsi and the Coke sitting next to each other, there seems to be a much larger variety of Pepsi flavors to choose from. Even though they are all Pepsi, it's still a technically different drink because of the flavors that they've added to it. Pepsi also benefits from cost minimization, lower operating costs, products that they offer at lower prices. That's probably why when you walk in, you see, sales on Pepsi products, 4 for $5, things like that. Next slide, please, sir. They also have several capabilities and resources that they can pull from. PepsiCo has a global presence, a large distribution network, a steady supply chain that, as I mentioned before, employs both farmers from large and small operations, a wide variety of products, all within the food categories, and a very strong marketing presence, as we've already discussed. The horizontal integration and related diversification, we have products here that, for example, the Wimbledon are Russian dairy products. They still fall within the food category, but they are special and specific to Russia. You will not find this anywhere outside of that country. They also offer Sabra. At one time, they had Tropicana, as Wayne just said, has been sold now. Rockstar Energy Drinks is a new acquisition. And then another unique thing is that when they acquired Quaker Foods, they also acquired Gatorade, just adding to that horizontal integration.
Well, this Gatorade, I'll make it quick. Gatorade was one of those bricks that Mrs. Nguyen put into the non-carbonated beverage category. So again, the theory went like this. Coke is the dominant force in carbonated beverages, and particularly colas. So we're going to be the dominant force in non-carbonated beverages. We're going to have Aquafina, which at that time was the leading brand for bottled water. We're going to have Gatorade. We're going to have, I forget what I guess Tropicana. But the intent was to become the dominant force in non-carbonated beverages, which were deemed to be healthier than carbonated beverages. So this was part of that good for you strategy. That was faster, wasn't it?
All right. At one point, PepsiCo did attempt vertical integration. It did not go over very well. In the late 70s and early 80s, they acquired Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC. They eventually ended up selling these in 1997 to Yum Brands. And the reason they didn't work is because when Pepsi acquired them, they ended up competing with their customers. The other thing that they did is that they, at one point in time, had Wilson Sporting Goods, which they sold in 1985, completely unrelated to anything else they were doing. And they also had, at one point in time, North American Van Lines, which they sold in 1984. Something neat that I did think about the other day, however, is PepsiCo could have possibly been ahead of their time if they had gone the Amazon route and turned them into Pepsi trucks. It's just a thought. Amazon has their own trucks and planes and everything. Why couldn't Pepsi? But again, at the time, big conglomerates were all the rage. So PepsiCo, of course, jumped on that bandwagon. But as soon as they found out it wasn't working for them, they sold everything off and focused on what they were good at. Next slide, please, sir. Which has led to some very successful ventures. These are just some examples of the alliances and joint ventures that PepsiCo has undertaken. Naturally, we have the Starbucks and Lipton tea ready to drink products. Suntory is the Chinese company that PepsiCo works with to produce all of their Chinese snacks and specialty items. We have the Beyond Meat with the Planet Partnership that I mentioned earlier, Quaker Oats and Gatorade, Sabra, Life Water, and there is the Boston Beer Company, which will be rolling out the Hard Mountain Dew next year.
Wow.
And so next we will be getting into the Ansoff's growth model. So this right here is just pretty much an example of the growth model itself. So the next slide.
I'm sorry, pardon me just a minute. I've got to catch up with you guys. I'm sorry. Let's see. So we're going to 73. Believe it or not, I actually write down what you talk about.
Okay, so this right
At
here
least
is the
one person is listening.
So this right here, we're going to be discussing the Ansoff's growth matrix model. So at the top, we're going to be talking about the products, where on the side is the markets. So on the existing and new products at the top with the market penetration saturation, you can see I put some of the things such as like customer relationships management, like I mentioned earlier, some of the media advertisements. Right beside it under product development products. We talked about like the R&D labs and the medical doctors, as well as their acquisition of Frito-Lay, and how they acquired Mabel and also Wim Dan. And then if you go right below that, we talked about the new products and markets as well for the product proliferation. We also have like KFC, Pizza Hut, and Wilson Sporting Goods. So, and then right beside that, we have the market development under the new existing, in which they have their entry into India, China, Russia, and Mexico. So on this slide is just pretty much just a visual representation of the last slide. So at the top, you can see where we had this image before. This is a picture of Cardi B and her advertisement, and just trying to get towards the younger generation. And then right beside that, we have the product development. Under this, I put Gatorade and Aquafina. Right below this, we have the product proliferation. That word is just so hard. Some of the items included like KFC and as well as Pizza Hut. And then right beside it, we have the market development, like I mentioned before, with Wim Dan. And then this right here is just items out in China, some dairy items that I found that are in China right now.
Do you all, the rest of you, agree that Wim Dan is a market development item? What do you think, Wayne?
Yes.
You do?
Well, if they can bring that product into a new market, let's say if as soon as the sanctions from Russia.
The new market is Russia. Had PepsiCo
Yes,
produced dairy products previously?
No, sir.
Okay, so it's a new product for a new market, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what do we call new product for new market?
Penetration. Oh no.
We call it product proliferation.
Proliferation.
Product proliferation is new product for new market. So Wim Dan is probably best placed in product proliferation. Granted,
Okay.
so is Kentucky Fried Chicken, but again, new product, and again, the market is questionable. But if we're thinking that it's for the quick service restaurant, that's different enough that we can leave it there. But without a doubt, windmill down is product proliferation. So if you get a chance, you might want to change that. Otherwise, the people listening to the recording will now know.
Okay, perfect. Next slide. So on this slide, I'm sorry.
Just a second, and I could do something like that. Have a little dog sticking out there or something. Oh, well. Ah, maybe like that. Now we have it. The problem is that when I close this, it'll go right back to the way you had it. Anyway, off we go.
Okay, so this next slide just pretty much sums up what we previously talked about. So under market penetration, as you can see, I put media advertisements. So they do use, again, stars like Beyonce, where I think it was Sarah who had the slide where she was pushing a cart full of Pepsi. Then we have stars like Michael Jackson and Britney Spears who also boost their brand. And then under the market development, right now, Pepsi is entering and emerging in markets such as India, Russia, well, already are entering into markets such as India, Russia, and China. And then under product development, like I said in the previous slide, they're developing, they're leading snack and non-carbonated beverages providers, keeping themselves in industries that above Coca-Cola, their competition. And then we have lastly, product proliferation. That word is just getting me every time. And you moved it over there. So with Windmill Dan, they allow PepsiCo to enter into the dairy and food segment.
Yeah, and we have some others that might be more appropriate for this category, such as North American Van Lines, which is crazy, but we were crazy in those years. Wilson Sporting Goods, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and so forth, but especially North American Van Lines and Wilson Sporting Goods, new products for new markets, just like Windmill Dan is. So, okay.
And so this right here is just a summary and conclusion of this section. So PepsiCo, they continue to increase in market shares, depends on, how well they take advantage of their growing economies in emerging nations. This includes continuing to use the Ansoff matrix model to increase their revenue through celebrity endorsements and market development into other countries.
Okay.
Next slide.
All right, so here we're going to talk about implementation priorities. You're fine. You can go ahead and move to the next slide when you're ready. Okay, so implementation priorities. We're going to start with major projects and programs. PepsiCo has quite a few. So here we have pictures of the Beyond Meat and PepsiCo partnership, AKA the Planet Partnership. And this coincides with the next slide as well. So if you could, okay, there we go. This is PEP Plus or PepsiCo Positive. So PepsiCo Positive or PEP Plus is focused on three main categories. We have positive agricultural, positive value chain, and positive choices. The Beyond Meat partnership would fall under the positive choices. So these two projects kind of go together. Positive choices is really about planet and people brands embody and amplify positive outcomes for the planet and the people on the planet. Means that they're being transparent with their packaging and their labeling, and they're partnering with healthier items. And then with the positive value chain, and this kind of goes into that as well, this chart. So you can go for it, it's fine. This chart kind of talks about the 3 different categories as well. Mainly it's just focusing on the company's corporate social responsibility, or CSR. With the positive value chain, they have net zero emission in their value chain by 2040. Also net water positive impact through water efficiency, and then through the positive agriculture, which Heather has spoken about as well. They're working to use regenerative agricultural practices across 7 million acres. And then we have the power of,
Okay,
okay, you cut me off. It's okay. No, it's fine.
well,
And
go ahead. I thought you were done.
no, well, the only last thing I would like to say, not only does it focus on the corporate social responsibility for the company, but it also helps market the company toward consumers that look for that sort of thing, especially the younger generations who are focused on companies that are invested in not only their consumers, but in the future of the planet.
Okay.
Then we have the power of one. We've already discussed this. Again, it brought together kind of, the bottling and the grocery stores. It brought together the food and beverage leaders across North, South, and Central America. It also included the creation of Global Snacks Group, or GSG. It did focus on innovation for snack product portfolio, bringing the drinks and the snacks closer together in the grocery stores for consumers. Definitely a differentiation marketing strategy, and it worked toward building relationships directly with the suppliers and the retailers.
Good slide.
All right, then of course we've got the good old fun, better, good for you. We've already talked about this several times. Currently PepsiCo is working on social media advertisement for the fun for you and better for you products. And then again, their continued expansion on the good for you products as the market focuses on healthier eating.
Okay.
All right, and then we have the Pepsi Challenge. So the Pepsi Challenge was a blind taste test, basically with 1 cup of Pepsi and 1 cup of Coca-Cola. It concluded that more than 50% of tasters preferred Pepsi. From its inception in 1975, the challenge has successfully grabbed market share from Coke. If you notice down there in the bottom left, we have a picture of Roger Enrico. He was the marketing king, or the Cola King, which is a name he earned during the 1980s when he was in charge of Pepsi's marketing, and he worked up that famous Pepsi Challenge. Again, those blind taste tests, they really took a hit on Coca-Cola, made Coca-Cola panic, and they actually changed their 100-year-old recipe in 1985 so that they could taste more like Pepsi Cola due to the outcome of the Pepsi Challenge. So it was a big deal.
It was a big deal, and Roger also actually was the architect of oh God, the power of one. You've got Indra Nuyi's picture on that slide, but Enrico's the guy who actually cooked it up. And he was just a great marketer. He was a great architect of strategy.
All right, so here we just have the new skills and capabilities needed. So this is just kind of reflecting on the current projects that Pepsi has going. So I've listed biofuel manufacturing capabilities to achieve the net zero emissions the company is hoping to achieve in the PEP Plus initiative, water purification and treatment systems to reduce water usage, increase in recycling plants and systems to continue reduction in plastic use for packaging, and increase education and training to promote advancement in human rights and diversity. I really like that about the PEP Plus project, because not only does it focus on environmentally sustainable practices, but it also focuses on bringing people together, not only within PepsiCo, but across the world. So here we talk about the organization of the company. So currently the way that the company is organized is into 6 different divisions. So they do implement a multi-divisional organizational strategy. As you can see here, they've got 3 primary divisions in North America. They've got the beverage, the snacks, and then the Quaker. And then they have a division for Latin America, one for Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, and then one for the Middle East and North Africa. Each division, I didn't make it to where it was under each one because each division actually has their own separate departments for those dots down there. So each of those 6 would have their own operations, development, government and legal, finance, HR, talent training and development, and communications departments. And then this here is the suggested changes to that organizational structure. Currently, we suggest that they add a division for Asia, specifically for China and India. They need their own division. As these markets continue to expand, PepsiCo must ensure productivity in these locations. So adding that new division with those sub-departments will definitely help the company achieve that.
Wow. There's another one of those imaginative charts of yours, Sarah.
You don't see it?
No, I did. I'm congratulating you.
I'm like, is it
Going
invisible?
for going outside the box.
Okay.
For coming
Okay.
up with an innovative suggestion. But if you don't want the compliment, I'll take it back.
No, I just thought you meant you couldn't see it, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So leadership changes. Ramon LaGuarta is the chairman and CEO. The reason that I placed him on the slide is because he did take over as the CEO in October of 2018. When Ms. Nui retired, it was believed at the time that the lead of the departments in North America were going to take over. However, Ramon LaGuarta was in charge of some of the international location divisions. So they really wanted somebody who was comfortable and familiar with international business and relations. So he is the current chairman and CEO, meaning that he is over all 6, potentially 7 divisions of PepsiCo.
You've massacred his name.
LaGuarta.
His name is Ramon LaGuarta. But
I'm sorry.
it's okay. He doesn't know.
All right, and then we just have our summary and conclusion. So in summary, again, Pepsi is focused on implementing development strategy centered around environmental and social sustainability. Through their partnership with Beyond Meat, they capitalize on green eating. Pep Plus focuses on clean, green, sustainable operations. And as consumers become more interested in the future of the planet and society, PepsiCo realizes that they must adapt to that. So there will be investment. I know we have forecasted that the leverage will drop. That will remain the same, but there will be, I guess you could say, increased leverage due to these new programs. We do still, forecast that the leverage will drop, but with this investment, it will definitely cost the company some money, but overall, it will be worth it.
Okay. My God. That's 188 slides. Now, what's amazing is that Jennifer May and Katie Mullins are still here. You all ought to send them thank you notes.
Thanks
It
for
was
listening.
really interesting. I thought it was really
This-
interesting. Y'all did a
Thank
great
you.
job.
This
I was getting hungry.
this actually was a really good job. Katie, are you still there, or did she fall asleep? She was on her couch. Oh, are you awake? You fell asleep for a few minutes, didn't you? Did you fall asleep? Katie?
It is past my bedtime, but like Jennifer said, I stayed on because at least I was learning something about PepsiCo.
Well, I think it's really fantastic that you two hung around. Okay, so it's late and we'll have to end this, but I do want you to know, first of all, for those of you who are listening to this program, it's not necessary to have 188 slides to get a good grade. But what these people did was really cover everything. And we got, there are a couple of little glitches, but they're not major. If we did mention them, if you happen to have a chance to just repair those glitches that I mentioned, you can replace the PowerPoint file with a new one. But if not, it's okay because we've discussed them. And in the meantime, job well done. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday. Yeah, and well, I won't mention anybody individually, but I do think there were a couple of folks who really knocked the ball over the fence there that did a real good job. So thank you so much. And
I just want to say thank you to my team members. Couldn't have done it without y'all. Couldn't have made it this far without y'all. Love y'all. Good night.
Thank you.
boy,
Thanks,
that
Sarah.
that sounds great. What makes these projects go well, and it's very difficult for you guys because you live so far away from each other. It's very difficult to come together as a team. But if what makes these projects go better than others is when there is teamwork and you're able to coordinate and help each other out, look at each other's work and sometimes make suggestions. And that's what really puts the extra measure of quality in these projects. And I don't know whether that's what you did or not, but you did a great job. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful holiday, and I'll see you guys in the future. Bye.
You too, Professor Ronan. Good night.
Have a good
Good night.
holiday,
Good
Professor
night.
Rooney.
Goodbye, you guys.
Good night, everyone.
Night.